Welcome to the Belts, Bumps, and Barbed Wire podcast. This podcast is presented by DMV Wrestling at dmvprowrestling.com. Hi, this is Jeff Quinton. Welcome to Belts, Bumps, and Barbed Wire, the podcast affiliated with www.dmvprowrestling.com. Our guest today is Red Dawg, and we're going to talk to him about his wrestling career, about podcasting, and about some other topics as well, whatever may come up. First, I just want to have you introduce yourself and tell us about your history in pro wrestling.
Yeah, well, I am the Air Force veteran intel specialist, the one you call on when you need to get the job done, and your friendly neighborhood Red Dawg. That's right, the DICK of this industry, the dog in charge, kid. So you really need to get your mind out the gutter. Let's get into it, right? So, I'm now just in my third year, and I tell people all the time, it's like, I'm older in the game, but I'm still young in the tooth, if that makes sense. And the reason why is just I've had a lot of life experience prior to me even just wanting to become getting into this business. I was former military, 6 years active duty Air Force, and then when I got out the Air Force, like all I wanted to do was work to become a pro wrestler. So I had a lot of things I had to kind of go through, a lot of hoops I had to dive through to get myself all set up. And finally, like 3 years ago, right before the pandemic hit, I decided I was like, this is the time. So I made the leap and jumped into this full force. Got stopped by the pandemic for a couple weeks or a couple months, and then then I jumped right over and said, let's get it.
And I know I've seen the answer to this next question, and my daughter found it really amusing, and I just wanted to bring it up now. How did you get the name Red Dawg?
So it's very anticlimactic. I feel like a lot of people, once they hear it, they're like, "Oh, really?" Or I get like one of two reactions. One is like "Oh, really?" And the other ones are like, "Wow, I never even thought about that." But my first name's Clifford. That is my shoot name. And a lot of people get thrown off all the time because they feel like there's like some deeper meaning to the name Red Dawg. I'm like, no. It's just that my name is Clifford, like Clifford Big Red Dog, and that's how I put it all together. So I used to get made fun of about it all through like elementary school and was being bullied, and then going into junior high school. And about my junior year, I decided it's time to like take back what is rightfully mine. And I said, this nickname's gonna run with me everywhere I go. And I stitched it on the back of my practice jersey in football. And from then on, I was like, this is what I'm gonna do. This is who I am. This is what I want to be. And if anybody's got a problem with it, that's on them, not me. And so I kind of took back the power of kids being able to just make fun of me and be like, "Come here, boy," and like do little whistle things. I decided it was my time to run wild with it, and I did. And the way I changed it over to the DAWG was one day I was watching college football and I saw Georgia and it had this big ass sign that said "Go Dogs," and I was like, "Yo, I really like that." So I changed the spelling of my name from REDDOGG to REDDAWG.
And my mom would appreciate that. She went to Georgia.
Well, you can tell her, "Go Dog." Even though me personally, like I'm a Husker fan at heart, like I'm like, "Go Dogs," because that's they're the inspiration behind it.
When you were spending your time in the military, when you were a kid playing football, before you actually got to the point that you were getting in the wrestling business, what wrestlers influenced you to want to get into wrestling?
There's been a few, and a bunch have changed over time. But when I first got into it, like when I first got into wrestling as a kid, Sting, Rey Mysterio, Chris Jericho, Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, all those guys were just so much fun to watch. And then watching people like Lex Luger, watching people like Randy Savage, watching people like Hulk Hogan back in the day when, and I'm one of those that I grew up right into like the prime of everything, like WCW and WWF before it became WWE. So I used to watch, both sides. So I watched Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. I watched, guys like The Patriot or Steve Blackman, Ken Shamrock. Like I love watching just in wrestling, but guys who like specifically influenced me and wanted me or made me want to get into the business was guys like Sting, Jericho, and Rey Mysterio.
What current wrestler have you enjoyed working with the most?
Wow. There's been a few.
It can be more than one.
Yeah, it's like there's been a few. Sickened is obviously one of my favorites that I get to work with. I know a lot of people see matches with me. Two that I don't think a lot of people have got to see these matches yet. They're on my YouTube page. If you guys ever want to go, just check it out. But I got to work TJ Sykes, the Red Prince himself, um, and I got to work him on two different occasions. And both times, like the matches were just, to me, I felt like the matches were just like phenomenal, right? And they may not have been because, like, I don't know, but to me, I just felt like the matches hit on all sorts of cylinders. And another person I got to work uh, was Andino, and working him twice. Once at HWF, and the other time got to wrestle. We got to work at a Lucha Libre Promotions in Washington D.C. And both those matches were a lot of fun as well. So I had a blast being able to work with Andino. And if I had to pick one more match, right, one more person, uh, it's a person that guided me a lot through my wrestling journey, and his name is Beastman. Getting to work Wes was amazing, and he actually helped me out so much. But we got to tear it up a couple different times, and maybe one time I'll be able to get a dub on him. But for right now, I just got two L's.
Would he be your dream match, or is there somebody bigger that would be your fantasy match?
Rey Mysterio, hands down, is my fantasy match. Like, if I get to work Rey one time, I think I would just be done. I would be done in the business. And it's crazy because, like, there's a lot of people out there, but I've been watching Rey Mysterio since 1995. Like, I feel like that one just kind of dates me, but I have been watching him for so long. And so to watch him, back in 2006, win the Royal Rumble and then win the title at WrestleMania and then win it again, only to lose it later in the night to John Cena, and to watch him just recently get inducted to the Hall of Fame, like, as the kid inside me, like, and this is gonna be like something where a lot of people are gonna see behind, but the kid inside me turned joyous. Like, I was so overwhelmed with like emotion. Like, I was in tears when they announced that he was gonna be inducted. I was in tears when he was giving his Hall of Fame speech. I was in tears when he had his first run with the heavyweight title after WrestleMania. So to watch Rey Mysterio be able to do things that he did, yeah, that would be the ultimate honor, is to be able to get to work him.
What do you think of the story right now with Ray and Dominic?
I love it. I love it so much. It was so cool back in 2000, it was like 2004, 2005, when Dominic kind of like emerged as, obviously, with like Ray's being son, and watching him kind of grow up, and then like seeing him behind the scenes like put in work and like get stronger and get taller, right? And I was just like, wow, like this kid's gonna go somewhere. And then he debuts, and then you see him that whole time when he got his ass kicked by Seth Rollins. Uh, with the kendo stick. Like, I'll never forget that picture because that was just brutal. But then, like, to see him grow into like, hey, I'm my dad's kid. This is who I am. Blah 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 blah. I'm the ultimate babyface. And once he turned, I was like, this is where it's gonna get better. And so to see him working as a heel right now, it's cool. I really enjoy like his work right now, and even just like this past SmackDown where like he was just getting boos rained on him left and right. He couldn't even speak because he was getting booed so much. I was so happy for him because I was like, you know what, like this is everything that any good heel would want, and he gets all the boos, and like they drown him out, and that's awesome. So right now, like the work that he's putting in with Ray, I'm super happy for him, and I'm super happy with the storyline the way it's going.
Now, what is your most embarrassing moment in wrestling?
Oh man, I I don't know. I have a couple of them. There are times where, like, because I'm still young in this business and I'm still learning, there are times where I legitimately forget things and I just kind of like stare awkwardly at somebody. And it's happened a couple times. So that does get kind of embarrassing. But I haven't, like, for, you know, knock on wood, I haven't had any like wardrobe malfunctions or anything like that yet. So I guess I'm pretty safe with that. But yeah, most times, like, I'll have these moments where I'm just kind of like staring awkwardly at somebody and I just know I'm supposed to do something. I'm like, yeah, I don't know.
I'll tell you a couple of previous guests. Basically, Phil Stamper had new ring gear when he started wrestling, and he took a slide and went under the ring. Sean Hardy got locked out of a hotel room when he was on the road with nothing but a towel, and had to go down to the lobby full of tourists and other people to try to figure out how to get back into his room. I think he had a towel. He may not have even had a towel, but
I'm fortunate enough to not have that happen yet.
What moment are you the proudest of in your wrestling career?
I think just debuting. I think and debuting in front of like a live crowd. It's crazy because like it takes a lot of guts to do what we do like in the business, and I only mean that in the sense that like anybody can say that they want to be a pro wrestler, anybody can say they want to do something right, but to kind of follow through and keep working and getting there, it's different. And I know that recently like I was meeting with one of my mentors and he asked me, he's like, what do you want to do now that you're in this business? I was like, I don't know, I just wanted to see if I could hang and bang. And he was just like, cool, well we're here now and you're doing it, so now you got to think of another goal. And I was like, that's yeah, that's really true. Like I have to think of bigger goals and stuff like that. So I think just getting in here and you know getting myself in the best shape that I can currently and keep pushing, like that's pretty much like all I can do. It's like to show my little one like, hey, like if you really want something you have to go work for it and you got to push for it. So now I step into the ring every single time, like I'm very appreciative of just the opportunity of just being there.
Now I want to ask you about podcasting because you're involved in a couple of podcasts, hosting and co-hosting. Could you first mention the two podcasts you're involved in?
Yeah, so it's actually one big podcast, but it's two different shows. So it's called the Three Count Podcast. We have two shows. It's called Chaz and Friends, which you can find every Sunday live as a debate show, unless it's like a holiday. Then obviously we're not going to be on. Whether it's like Easter, Mother's Day, whatever. Right? When I won't be on, we won't have shows that day. And then our other show that we have is called Now Enter the Ring. So I'm very proud of Now Enter the Ring, as much as I am proud of Chaz and Friends because I do love our debate show, but Now Entering was kind of my baby. It was something that we started up in May of 2020. And the reason why we started up the show, obviously, as I mentioned, 2020, there was COVID, right? So everything got shut down, and we tried to figure out a way to get more content out to our listeners. And so what we started doing was recording episodes and then like just putting episodes out, episode after episode after episode. Um, and we built it up. So, right now, like in the can, we're just waiting to be released. We have like 319 episodes. So I'm very proud of that because we've had a lot of incredible guests, right? Whether it was Shane Taylor Promotions or TJP, or you've seen Shaw Guerrero on our show, Killian McMurphy, Phil Stamper has been on our show, a couple different times. We brought on a whole range of guests and been able to talk to them. And just recently, we even launched off a second kind of spin-off. We launched off two spin-off shows. One of them called Now Entering 201, where we brought guests that we had like really good relationships with or great connections with during our interviews. We brought them back to do a little bit more in-depth diving into like the wrestling scene. And then we just started up a show called the Three Count Podcast Quick Cuts, where we go to different shows, we grab a couple guys, a couple wrestlers, female or male, and we just talk to them. And the first guest that we were able to get was actually Billy Starks. So, one of the hottest names on Indies right now. She was our first guest that we were able to bring on the show. And then from there, we had the Tar Dynasty. We've also released out interviews with Lady Frost and Rico Hendricks. So, like, the names are kind of building up just based on where we are and how we're able to work it. But yeah, it's very something I'm very proud of is how far the podcast has come. We started the whole thing, I remember, off of Skype. Then we went to Zoom. Then we came to StreamYard, and now you can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Facebook. You can even find us on Spotify. And all the videos, they're all video formats, except for maybe the first couple years because I don't think Spotify had that ability just yet. But once they let us know that we could actually put our videos for our podcast up on video form, that's what we did. So you can catch all of our content up on Spotify and YouTube and Facebook.
Okay, my next question is still podcast related. Since you've been doing this 319 episodes worth, as you just said, what do you think makes a good wrestling podcast?
I think it's just being genuine. I think that's the number one thing, right? Like the one thing that a lot of people have issues with when it comes to podcasting is they all want to ask like the same kind of questions, right? How did you like? It doesn't even matter like what podcast it is. When it's an interviewing podcast, it's always the same questions, right? Like, what did you do? How did you get here? What do you think of this? What do you think of that? What's this? And the idea of like a good podcast is that you want to feel like you're in a conversation with somebody, right? I get inspiration from Chris Van Vliet and Joe Rogan, right? And I know depending on where you are, depending on who you are, right? Joe Rogan's kind of a taboo name, I know, but the thing is that he has these great long conversations with people, and that's just what it is. It's a conversation, and you feel like you're in the room with that person as they're having that conversation. So you want to be a part of that conversation. I'll be real, when I listen to the Chris Van Vliet show, or Insights, or I go and listen to the Joe Rogan Experience. Like, I will find myself having conversations with those guys, knowing that they can't hear me, but I feel genuinely like I'm a part of the conversation. So I strive really hard in my podcast to have those conversations with guys and draw that out of them, because one, I am who I am. Whether you meet me behind the scenes or you meet me like out in public, right? It doesn't really change. Like, that's not who I am unless I'm in the wrestling ring. Then that character is a whole different character. But when you come and talk to me, like, I present myself the same way, regardless. And so when you get to talk to me on a podcast, it doesn't really change. It's just me having fun and wanting you to like express yourself and talk to you about things that you've kind of gone through, and just like learn and interpret, and then try to, you know, reflect like on how, your experiences can help me be better in the ring.
I'll tell you one interview format that I like when he does it. I'm really not a fan of the classic Howard Stern where he's just crude and vile and everything. I'll listen to that to a certain point, but I like when Stern does his interviews with people, like the one he did with Bruce Springsteen that ended up on HBO recently.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Again, it goes back to just having a genuine conversation and just making people feel comfortable to have those conversations with you. And if you're gonna be kind of like snarky and stuff like that and act like you know everything, or you're asking like really just the bland questions, you're not coming up with anything original, like, people don't want to be a part of that. And I think one thing that kind of separates my show from like a lot of other people's shows, like, I like to ask questions that are just ridiculous, right? So, a question I'll share it here, because I asked pretty much 7 or 8 of the same questions, right? But one of the questions I like to ask is, what's the worst bump you've taken? And I get a different answer every single time that I talk about it. And we're talking about over 300 episodes, and I have not had an answer repeat once. And that's a testament to like learning about people's experiences. And another question that, you can ask those questions, those challenging questions where people are going to come to you with like a real answer, and it's fun. And sometimes you may not get a lot of content out of some interviews, and that's fine. But for the majority of them, as long as you're having that genuine conversation, people are going to want to open up and talk about themselves.
So, what is the worst bump you've ever taken?
Uh, I've been fortunate that I haven't taken any really bad bumps yet. I think the biggest bump I've taken was actually recently. I took a bookend from Andino, and it was a night that my friends were in the crowd, so I wanted to go over the top with them, and I did, and I ended up like straining some muscles in my back. So it was like pretty rough to go like to the gym and try to lift, because like I had jumped so high and slammed so hard on the ground that, like, yeah, I knew it too. The moment I hit, I felt everything kind of pull, and I was like, oh, and I rattled myself a little bit. The good thing was is I was keeping my chin tucked, but I could feel like everything inside my body was just like, yeah, we shouldn't jump that high again.
Back more to podcasting. You named Joe Rogan and Chris Van Vliet. What other podcast, wrestling and otherwise, do you listen to regularly?
So one of my other favorite podcasts I like to listen to is it's I gotta look it back up because it's been a little bit since I've checked it out. But I was listening to one. It's actually like a true crime one, and that's actually been a lot of fun to listen to. And the reason why is because it helps with the Innocence Projects, which is definitely like massive to me. About especially when we get to hear people talk about like their stories and like why they should be found innocent, right? So if you guys are wondering, the podcast is called the Wrongful Convictions Podcast. Is definitely one of my favorites. And then I like to listen to oral sessions. Again, it goes back to that whole open up, have a full conversation with people, and it's really interesting to hear Renee talk about just life with people and just like be open about it. So yeah, those would be my two big ones outside of mine and the Joe Rogan Experience, and even Insights.
Let's get to some questions that are non-wrestling related now. What's your favorite food?
My favorite food is enchiladas. I tell everybody, it doesn't matter the flavor. Like, as long as it doesn't have pickles, onions, or not onions, pickles, coconut, or like some other unnecessary thing like anchovies, like it's gonna be delicious.
And what is your favorite drink?
Uh, Alcohol or not alcohol?
Either or both.
Okay. Alcohol wise is definitely Terramana tequila right now. So yeah, I'm like out here supporting the Rock. There's your free plug, Dwayne. Next time it's gonna cost you. And after that, it's pretty much like a who's who's list of things I like to drink. When I'm not sponsored by them, but shout out to Monster for coming out with a Red Dog hydro flavor. I don't know how they came up with the name, but it's definitely spelled the same way that I spell my name. And then Monster Spark currently because I'm a big fan of like raspberry lemonade flavors. I don't know why, but yeah, so those would be my two outside of that.
And your favorite band or musical group?
There is a ton. I'm a music junkie. I can't front. I was just like earlier today, I was listening to Public Enemy. And then when I'm in the gym, it's usually like a mix of like Outcasts and Megadeth or Pantera, or even if I wanted to be like more relaxed, I'll listen to things like I don't know, Garth Brooks, Clint Black. So it's a mix of a lot of different music. So I can't really pick one. But currently, the Creed 3 soundtrack is like massively like in my playlist and has been playing a lot. And I've in fact that whole album is just so good by Dreamville. So if anybody hasn't checked it out yet, please go check out the Creed 3 soundtrack because it's really good from top to bottom.
And your favorite vacation spot?
Hawaii, hands down. I lived there for 5.5 years. It was a great time to live on the island of Oahu. Anytime that I get to show love to the island is definitely necessary, especially with all the stuff that's going on the island right now that people aren't talking about. Uh, but I definitely want to throw a whole bunch of love out to the islands because the islands gave me nothing but love and showed me all the best things that came out of there for me came from the islands. So I definitely want to continue to show my love and support to the islands of Hawaii.
Were you at Kinea?
No, I was in Joint Pearl Harbor. Yeah, over on Hickam.
Okay. And what was the last book you read?
So currently I'm still actually reading a book, and it's actually the essentials of strength and conditioning. One thing that I think a lot of people don't know is that I am a personal trainer, but I am actually working to become a strength and conditioning coach, and so I'm currently like reading my strength and conditioning book to go work for my certification. Now, if you want to talk about stuff that's for leisure, uh, yeah, I think the last book I read was probably like Breaking Dawn, like the Twilight series book, and that was like years ago.
We talked about your debut was your proudest moment. Do you remember much about that match and who the match was against and what happened?
Yeah, so it was at C3W. It was a taped show. It was against Big Trouble Ben Bishop, and it was pretty much like a glorified squash match. So I actually jumped Big Trouble Ben Bishop, and then from there, like I just worked his leg and just try to like continue to like beat him down, only to be unsuccessful in my debut at C3W. But yeah, that was my debut. That was my first match, and actually, I think it's on my YouTube page. So if you guys want to go check that out, you guys definitely can. I give you guys the links at the end of the show.
Yeah, I'll give you a chance to run down all your personal socials at the end and any events you have coming up. So what did you want to be besides? Did you always want to be a wrestler when you grew up when you were a kid, or was there something else that you wanted to be?
You know, in my life, like I had like a lot of different aspirations of things that I wanted to be. When I was like young, I wanted to be a professional football player. Then I wanted to be a professional basketball player, and I just never stopped growing past 5'9". So I realized that that dream was dead. Then I was an amateur wrestler, and I thought that maybe I could have what it takes to make it to college and possibly further getting into like the Olympics. That never happened. But I kept working and pushing for it. After that, after like high school, I thought I might just fall into music and work in a musical field, regardless of what it was, whether it was hip hop or uh, just whatever, just any kind of any mark in there. Uh, that didn't work out. So I just wanted to keep working towards something else. And yeah, everything's changed from time to time. Like at one point when I was in the military, I was training to be an MMA fighter. Uh, that didn't pan out. And it wasn't because I didn't like getting hit. It was just that my job required me to be 12 on, 12 off all the time. So I never got the chance to actually go train. And then yeah, just everything kind of kept shifting over. And the first job I actually applied for when I got out of the military, I was actually working for a company. We won't talk about their name, but if you guys go to the, if you guys are aware of the New England Patriots and who sponsors the stadium, there you go. But anyway, I got released from my contract, and when I got released from my contract from that company, the first job I actually applied for was to be a writer for the WWE. So I kind of knew from that point, like I wanted to find a way to get into the business, and I guess for me, like the only real regret I kind of had was I kind of wish I would have made the jump into pro wrestling sooner, but it just didn't it just wasn't working out for me for whatever reason. And currently though, I'm kind of glad that I also got in when I did, because I don't know if I would be where I am mentally, because I was having so many issues with PTSD and anxiety. I don't know if I would be where I am now. So I'm glad that I was able to get in now when and it sounds weird, as I'm a little older, but I'm just happy being where I'm at now. But yeah, getting into the pro wrestling scene, after I realized that's kind of where I wanted to be, I was like, this where I belong.
So, what advice would you give to a young man or woman who wanted to get into wrestling?
Be ready, and I say this in a sense of do some research, right? Make sure this is exactly what you want to do, and then get ready, right? And I say that with learn. There's tons and tons and tons of material out there to help you get started about learning how to, listen for words, listen for calls, start using some memorization work, right? Because there's gonna be a lot of stuff thrown at you right away. I would also tell you find a credible school, find somebody that can help get you to a level, and then look for people who can get you to the next level, right? Sometimes the person that you're running into, the person that you're talking to, they have never been to where you want to get to. They might have connections to get you there, but you're going to have to really learn how to network in this business. So I think for me, the big things is get yourself ready to get into the business, get in shape, right? Start thinking about character work, that who you want to be when you're in the business, and then from there, uh, look to network. So those are my big threes. Learn to network, because network is huge.
And you said you were applied to be a writer at WWE, which I actually did a few years ago. Before I was doing anything with my website or podcast, it was just I'd been working in PR, and it was just why not? And I just wondered if you had any advice for anyone older who was trying to get into the business, either as a wrestler or into behind the scenes role, of what they should do.
So if you're looking to get behind the scenes, it's always like one of my things I think is start a podcast, right? Start some kind of like source that you can start practicing like how you want to get whatever it is you want to get across. So if you want to be a manager and you want to be able to speak and talk, get behind a microphone and learn how to speak and talk behind a microphone. It's very different from being like, "Oh, I can have a simple conversation." No, not really. Microphones are 100% different when you're talking in front of a live crowd. So you're going to have to learn how to adapt on the fly. And these kind of conversations, doing podcasts, interviews, they help tremendously because they keep things loose and fun, and they keep it on the fly. So that way you're always able to react. If you're looking to be an interviewer, right? Find a camera, get yourself, whether it's your cell phone or it's some way of being able to record yourself and practice, right? You can also do this in front of the mirror, like talk to the mirror as if you want to talk, so you can work on your facials and how you want to deliver your interview questions, right? There's always things that you can do if you're just trying to get in to help out with a promotion. Just show up to the promotion and ask them what you can do, and they're usually going to have something, whether it's setting up the ring, setting up the chairs, learning how to run the music, run the lights, whatever. Just go ask questions, and then just a promoter or a booker is going to help put you in the right direction of what you're trying to get accomplished.
Okay, and I'd like you to promote any upcoming wrestling card that you're a part of that you know about already.
Well, let's talk about what's going on. So, actually, just today, right, it got announced that on April 29th, I'm going to be at EWA for the Brats Beers and Burgers Fest. So, you guys will be able to catch me there. It's going to be in, I think it's just outside of Dundalk, if I remember right.
Yeah, it's in Dundalk at Key Brewing.
Yeah.
They've had that event before, and I thought about going. I might try to go this time, especially if you're going to be there.
Yeah, so it's going to be myself and Rico Hendricks teaming up against Jason Drake and Jesse O'Reilly. So for those who know, you know. Uh, one CW, I'm actually going to be there this weekend. So on the 15th, you can catch me there. You can catch me on the 22nd, actually back in Harrington, Delaware. So I'll be out in that way. And then from there, it's just like a who's list of things that's got going on. So going to be at Port of Voltage May 12th. I'm going to be at EWA again on the 13th. You can catch me at 1CW on the 20th of May. And then you can also catch me at Kings and Queens on the 26th and back at Voltage on the 2nd and Voltage on the 9th of June, as well as SWA on the 10th. And then that's actually my last booking for a while because, surprise, surprise, there's things that are going to be changing, just like the wrestling business does.
Run down your personal social media account.
I said, you can find me on all your favorite social media platforms, whether that's Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. You can find me on, I'm trying to think of Hive, right? PlayStation. It's all _Red Dawg 85. And if you type in Red Dawg 85 on YouTube, you can also find my YouTube channel there too. You guys can follow the 3 Count Podcast at 3 Count Podcast or 3 Count Podcast Streams. You guys can find all of our stuff on IG, TikTok at 3 Count Pod, and on Twitter at 3 Count _pod. So we have pro wrestling tees. So if you guys go on pro wrestling tees, type in the 3 Count Podcast, type in Red Dawg, you'll find all of our stuff there. You can find all the merch. If you go to foryourwear.com, you can actually find Pure Ignorance, which is Chaz the Don, Chaz Evans, as well as Prince Machiavelli and Noah Idol. Their store is actually there. The reason I bring them up is because Chaz is the other half of the 3 Count Podcast. And then you can also find Red Dawg stuff on For Your Wear as well. I feel like that's all my stuff that you can find me at.
You really need to be listening to the podcasts if you and Chaz are on there. I've seen Chaz wrestle a couple of times, and we've gone back and forth on Twitter a few times in a friendly manner. So,
yeah, Chaz is one of those guys that, a lot of people know us from as if you watch us on Twitter, the way we interact. Ignorant Dogs is definitely something that we have going on. But outside of that, on the podcast, like him and I, we just have fun bantering back and forth about wrestling. So if you guys ever want to catch us talking about it, it's all right there. It's a lot of fun, and him and I go toe to toe all the time. And one of us usually gets frustrated. I've watched Chaz walk off numerous times. I've walked off a couple times of the show because we were so upset with each other. But yeah, it's all in love at the end of the day. So I definitely appreciate having someone like him, and on the scene, right? It was his idea to start up the 3 Count Podcast. I was actually working at another podcast, fun fact, and I ended up leaving that podcast just to go work with Chaz because him and I hit it off so well in our first premiere episode. And so I was like, yeah, this is going to be everything we want and more. And it's turned out to be everything I've wanted.
That sounds great. And thanks for being with us tonight. And we'll look forward to seeing what you're up to in the future.
No doubt. Thanks for having me on.
I want to thank Red Dawg for being on the podcast today. I also want to thank you, the listener, for listening to us. And also would like to ask you to join us on DMVProWrestling.com to get the latest news every day on pro wrestling in the DMV region and beyond. Our executive producer is Scott English. Our production assistant is Josie Quinton. And I'm your host, Jeff Quint. Thanks and have a great week.